In the Machida suburbs of Tokyo, there's a little boy who loves collecting bugs and animals. He likes looking at them and wondering where they like to live and what they like to eat. His school teacher would let him make presentations to his schoolmates about the critters he collected. They called him Dr. Bug. The video game company Game Freak and its founder, Satoshi Tajiri, are prepping to release a game they've been developing for 6 years, a development cycle extremely long for this time. It's the passion project of Satoshi, who, after seeing the Game Boy's link cables, had an idea. What if there was a game where players could collect and trade critters? He imagined them traveling between the link cables to each player.
モンスター全部で150種類
In February 1996, Game Freak releases Pocket Monsters Red and Green in Japan, to huge success for a handheld game. Later that year, Game Freak decides to celebrate 1 million in sales by releasing a limited time updated version of the game called Pocket Monsters Blue. It was then re-released to celebrate 4 million in sales. That's pretty good for a new IP. It was time to head west. Pocket Monsters Blue version would be split back into 2 games. These games would be released as Pokemon Red and Blue version.
Meet the latest craze to sweep the country. It's a Japanese term short for pocket monster. Is creating a monster of a commotion for American kids.
That's all they're wanting now is pure Pokemon.
Pokemon is an undeniable obsession with children across the country.
Parents should not let their kids watch Pokemon, play Pokemon, buy Pokemon cards.
But that psychiatrist who had that quote last, these people haven't seen any of the cartoons at all. They have no concept at all.
Just how long will this fad last?
That fad has lasted a pretty long time. All versions of these games combined would sell 31 million copies and spawn the largest media franchise ever, valued at almost $100 billion at the time of this recording. Welcome folks, I'm Livid, and today we're going back to Pokemon's first generation games to see where the largest media property of all time started. This video will contain spoilers for the games, so be warned. Before our journey begins, if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's free and helps me out a lot. The background gameplay is my own. Follow me on Twitch if you'd like to play along with me live. Alright, sit back, relax, get yourself a Surge, because it's 1998, and we're about to play Pokemon Generation 1. Let's get my bias out of the way. I was 7 years old when these games came out. I was the perfect demographic. I was completely consumed by all things Pokemon. I had the games, cards, and watched the TV show religiously. These games were not just my first Pokemon games, they were the first Pokemon games in the West. I felt and continue to feel connected to their history. I still go back and play casually. While I absolutely love these games, they aren't perfect, and I'll point out the flaws. Having said that, I also think these games are overly criticized by some, specifically with claims that they're nearly unplayable with its glitches and balancing issues. Few games have sold 31 million copies. Fewer games have been remade, referenced, or played this much over the decades. It can't be all that bad. The world of Pokemon in the Red and Blue era is loosely based on Japan's real-life Kanto region. Inhabiting the region are over 150 Pokemon. Pokemon live in all sorts of areas, like grassy fields, caves, and in the oceans. They are largely caught to be battled with among people called trainers, but they also sometimes serve in other roles such as transportation, entertainment, or helping out with certain forms of labor. We play as a young trainer from Palatown, located in the southwestern part of the Kanto region. The town's inhabited by very few residents. In your home, it's just you and your mother. It's not known where your father is, although he is rarely mentioned in passing. Your neighbor is a boy similar in age named Blue, and his sister. Their grandfather is Professor Oak. He's a local Pokemon professor trying to learn more about Pokemon through adding more information about them into a device called a Pokedex. The goal of these games are to collect 8 gym badges from all over the Kanto region through battling gym leaders. These badges will be used to enter the Pokemon League competition and eventually see if you have what it takes to become the league champion. The secondary goal is to also catch more Pokemon and complete your Pokedex, although this is not required to complete the main story of the game. These two goals linked together push you forward as a player. You need to advance the story via battling different trainers and gym leaders. In order to do that, you need to catch more Pokemon to improve your team. These goals are constantly working with each other to expand the game further, leading to curiosity and discovery. What kind of Pokemon will you encounter next? What kind of Pokemon will your opponents have? You wonder where you can find new ones. A central theme that I will continually go back to is the power of choice. There are a lot of foundational elements in these games that people enjoy. You'd get a lot of different answers from people if you were to ask them what they love most about this series. But what really makes them come back to these games over and over again? Buy the new ones to replay the old ones, resetting a save file to do it all over again? I believe it's choice. You choose which version of the game you're going to play, choose your Pokemon, you choose how they develop, how they are used, what moves to teach. The reasonings are also your choice. Do you like how the Pokemon looks? Does it give you a great coverage for battling? Do you need something that can perform a myriad of tasks for you? Everything is in your hands, and you can have an entirely different experience each time you play because of the choices laid before you. Before we get into gameplay, I want to settle us in. I don't know what type of audience will be watching this video. It could be people walking down memory lane that just like Pokemon content. It could be a younger generation curious about where it all began. But it's important to anyone who wasn't there to understand the times we were in back then. Everyone get in the time capsule. We're going back to 1998. The internet did exist, but it wasn't nearly as accessible as it is now. We didn't have smartphones with Google that could answer any of our lingering questions. There was no YouTube to look up a guide or a how-to. You had to have a library card to use their computer if they had internet and if you had a library near you. Or you had to have a personal computer, and my family sure as hell didn't. Much of the information we got was via rumors on the playground or strategy guides, which were expensive. It's not an experience that could be easily replicated today. You can't wind back the clock to create that atmosphere again. That sense of discovery, wonder, the craze itself was unique to the time. But you were playing a handheld video game, not a console. You could run outside with your Game Boy to meet up with your friends and show each other all the new Pokemon you discovered or the hidden item you found. It was a necessity for gathering information, but we wanted to do it too. Seeing what types of Pokemon your friends were choosing was fun and exciting. There were entire locations that you could overlook but that your friends could tell you about, like the power plant. It felt like free DLC inside the game. It made such a small 8-bit world feel huge. There's a bad side to this too. There were many rumors which were entirely untrue, like mythical legendary Pokemon under trucks or Peekaboo. And yes, I fell for both, especially Peekaboo. But this type of drive to get outside and be amongst friends was exactly what Satoshi wanted. The rise of the internet and Wi-Fi made this type of interaction disappear over time. Although, for Pokemon Go fans, it returned in a huge way. But that's not really my cup of tea. Like any young boy, it's time to leave on an adventure all by yourself. Collect dangerous beasts, learn to gamble, and stop a criminal empire from conquering the region. But before we do any of that, we need our first Pokemon. In exchange for helping Professor Oak complete the Pokedex for his research, he's giving you a starter Pokemon. The first choice happens relatively quick, which I like. Far too many games today spend too much time on tutorials and not letting the player just play. The intro to this video likely took longer than it is to get your first Pokemon. He has 3 choices for you. Bulbasaur, the grass type, Charmander, the fire type, and Squirtle, the water type. There are 15 different elemental types in Pokemon Generation 1. They have advantages and disadvantages against each other. Some are immediately obvious until you learn them, but the 3 starters you're given access to are an absolutely brilliant decision on Game Freak's part. Water can put out fires, fires can burn grass, and grass can soak up water to grow. It's the classic rock, paper, scissors, and the elements are easy to understand. So how can you possibly decide between any of them? They look so cool, or maybe they look cute to you. How good will they be early game? How will they be late game? What will they look like when they're all grown up? The decision you make here is very important. It will affect how everything from this moment plays out. The typing of this starter Pokemon will encourage you to catch more Pokemon to give you access to different types of moves that you may not have. You truly can't go wrong with any of the 3. Some say Bulbasaur is easy mode, Squirtle is medium, and Charmander is hard. I don't really see it that way. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, and you can easily make decisions later that will balance out your choice. Bulbasaur will have an easier early game, but it's grass and poison type, something you can easily find even towards the start of the game like Oddish or Bellsprout. Squirtle is a water type. It will breeze through the first gym, and water types themselves are lacking early game. Charmander will have the harder time at the second gym, but fire types are even more elusive than water types at the beginning of the game. Choosing it will give you access to a very unique type early in game, a type which will also devastate many of the grass and bug trainers early on in game. But you get access to catch Pokemon quickly after this decision, so it's really not bad no matter what you choose. This decision will also have consequences, not only in the future, but right now. Your rival will always select the remaining Pokemon that will give him an advantage against the one you selected. I always chose Bulbasaur. I love the design, and as you train your Pokemon more, they will evolve into bigger and better versions of themselves. For this playthrough, I actually chose Squirtle because it's one of the ones I've chosen least over the decades. Before we can even get acquainted with our new friend, your rival challenges you. Your rival is similar to you in many ways. He is a young trainer eager to prove himself in the world. He also enjoys battling a Pokemon. He's even without his father. You two should be friends, but something within him turns potential camaraderie into rivalry. He's always insulting you and blowing you off. Although you beat him several times throughout the story, he refuses to ever accept defeat or say good job. As we progress through the game, you also see he trains like you would, collecting Pokemon of all different types and capabilities rather than focusing on a single type. Although sometimes his Pokemon have evolved before they should have, which isn't exactly fair. This rivalry is a constant throughout the game. There is nobody else in the game you'd rather beat more than him. As you set off on your journey, Professor Oak gives you a Pokedex. It's as beneficial to us as it will be for his research. A Pokedex helps you locate Pokemon you've ran into or seen before and help you track them down. Once you caught a Pokemon, you can read its Pokedex entries to find interesting facts or just flat out insane things like burning hotter than the sun or 1,000,000 punches per second. I encourage not only new but returning players to spend more time reading Pokedex entries. You'll learn much more about the Pokemon you're catching, or maybe even decide to use one just because you loved its entry so much. Instead of looking up on the internet where to find a Pokemon, try using the in-game version of Google. Your Pokedex can aid you in tracking down Pokemon. I also encourage players to speak with NPCs more. For a long time, I was somebody accusing these games of being too cryptic, not explaining much about how to advance the story or much valuable information at all really. But when I was researching for my video during this recent playthrough, I intently spoke to NPCs. My accusations were very much unfounded. NPCs do give you interesting information about the world. They hint where to go next, they say funny things, and some even hint where to find elusive Pokemon that you've been looking for. It may be difficult these days with access to so much information at the palm of your hands, but I encourage you to try and play these games without using the internet. I just think you'd be getting more of the core experience if you just use a Pokedex in-game and NPCs. The act of catching Pokemon themselves can be exhilarating and aggravating. You battle wild Pokemon and reduce their health down enough until it's easier to catch. But the more rare and powerful they are, the more difficult they will be to catch. And you start telling yourself certain tricks you're using are helping you catch Pokemon more. Pressing down and holding the B button, something I still do. Maybe it's not looking at your game as the ball keeps jiggling back and forth and turning off your volume. These rituals still remain with me today. I wonder if you guys have any. To get access to more Pokemon, we must defeat more gyms. Sometimes to beat more gyms, we have to catch more Pokemon. Unless you're one of those people who only uses one Pokemon. This strategy is entirely viable and it works. I'm always a proponent of doing what's fun for you. That's why we play video games after all, right? But for me, there is nothing less fun than that. I love catching and using new Pokemon. I intentionally avoid opinions about certain Pokemon just so I can catch them and figure them out myself. One of my favorite examples of this is using Mr. Mime for the first time. He always looked so silly to me and I never knew if he was any good, until I eventually used him in a playthrough and he worked great. Now I feel I have a special bond with him. Using more than one Pokemon also keeps things even with the AI. The AI's logic in these games doesn't always work very well or make any sense, and they often leave themselves wide open or they won't go in for the kill when they should. This can make battles trivial and anticlimactic. But when you expand your team and spread out the experience, it can give them an opportunity to even the odds a bit. The slogans for this series for a long time was "Gotta catch 'em all." Well, we would definitely like to catch 'em all, wouldn't we? Back in '98, when everyone was playing these games, the games being split into two was a win-win for customer and provider. Game Freak got the double up on sales for certain households, whose children could successfully argue that they needed both. I was not from such a household. So I got blue when I actually asked for red, but that was just a slight miscommunication with my mother and I still love playing blue. For us as young players, there was nothing else that promoted social interaction as much as trying to complete your Pokedex. Each version having their exclusive Pokemon was either genius or a positive after effect of marketing on Game Freak's part. Imagine if there was only a single version. Why would you need anybody else to beat the game? Wouldn't it then be like any other game? There were Pokemon that could only evolve via trading, but I don't think that would have been strong enough alone to encourage the amount of social activity. Catching a Sandshrew in your blue version as an offer to your friend who had red version and would be willing to trade you that beautiful Growlithe was something magical. You'd even be rewarded for this transaction, as the trainer ID of the Growlithe you just got would be different than your own, meaning it would forever get an experience boost while it was on your game. But of course, what started as contemporary brilliance turned into a longevity crisis. How are you now supposed to collect them all? You certainly aren't going to have a bunch of people running around playing red and blue version on their Game Boys anymore. Well, unfortunately, the original cartridges have a battery that would die over time that you would need to replace. So you would need 2 cartridges with fresh batteries, 2 Game Boys, and a link cable. Okay, so that's old tech. Let's say we want to use the 3DS. The games were released on 3DS, but who is actively playing their 3DS and then playing those games and happen to be around you? And what if somebody did want to play along with you now? Well, the 3DS store is shut down and you can't get red or blue on your 3DS through legitimate means anymore on it. So unless you're willing to double up on equipment and trade to yourself, this method is all but dead. It's going to be nearly impossible to get all the exclusives in one game now. Although I will say that Game Freak at least gave the second forms of the trade evolving Pokemon decent stats on their own. Graveler, Kadabra, and Haunter actually have pretty good stats, but there are also in-game trades. These were great and still are nice if you at least want to see the trade experience. Maybe you were a kid that lived in a remote area and didn't have anybody else to play with. The in-game trades at least gave you a taste of how it worked. In the early generations of Pokemon, all damage moves were split into 2 tiers, physical and special. All types of damage are under those 2 tiers instead of being based on the moves themselves. So your fire moves will be stronger the better your special stat. Your fighting type moves will be stronger the higher your attack stat. But there is an issue. I'll use my favorite example, Hitmonchan, the punching Pokemon. Hitmonchan is a fighting type, so it favors the attack stat. It has boxing gloves for hands, he must be good. He even learns amazing elemental punching moves like Fire Punch, Ice Punch, and Thunder Punch. And look at that high attack stat. Surely moves with punch in the name from a punching Pokemon hit super hard, right? Fire Punch is fire, that's under special. Okay, but Thunder Punch is, oh, that's thunder, that's also special. Well, at least one. Ice Punch, oh, come on. Now, these moves can still be used, and sometimes they may even hit decently hard depending on the stat of your opponent, but your punching master hits more like a pillow than he does Mike Tyson. I think you get the idea. You probably wouldn't have noticed this casually, but this is why sometimes you'd be using moves that in theory should work really well, but barely do anything. Then there's special itself. It's so special, it gets to be one combined stat. You see, physical was broken up into attack and defense. Our Hitmonchan using a fighting type move is going to work well because our attack stat is high. And that would remain true unless our opponent has a really good defensive stat, which is the direct counter to attack-based moves. But with special, they get the luxury of having it both be offensive and defensive in one stat. Take Alakazam. He's a nimble-looking guy. You know his special attacks hit hard because he's got spoons. But surely this scrawny guy can't take a hit, right? Well, actually he can. His special base is 135, meaning he can both hit with and take the strongest special attacks in the game like a champ. Okay, that all seems pretty bad, but my defense is this. I think casually this only comes up every so often. The enemy AI in these games make enough mistakes that it feels kind of evened out, even though maybe you're not hitting with the strongest of attacks. The gym leaders strewn about the Kanto region act as a test. Are you growing enough as a trainer to progress through the game? To be given the responsibility to use powerful moves in the overworld to continue your quest? There are 8 gym leaders across the region, each specializing in different types of Pokemon. Early in game, these typings matter a lot because you may have not rounded out your team yet. If you chose Charmander, Misty's water-type Pokemon will be tough for you. If you chose Squirtle, Lieutenant Surge and his electric Pokemon are going to bully you. As a Bulbasaur player, we fear nothing, so life is good. But again, with the gym leaders having tough matchups against you, that only promotes its own mechanics yet again. If you need something for Misty, grab a Bellsprout or an Oddish. If you need something against Lieutenant Surge, the Diglett Cave is just down the street. Its ground types will absolutely destroy electric types. It's not true for all of them, but most gym leaders are puzzles themselves. They're leaning not only on the type, but a strategy theme. Brock's going to use his Onix's Bye to soak up hits and slam you right back. Erica is going to drive you absolutely insane, with her Pokemon using continuous moves like Wrap, which will slowly eat you alive. My favorite gym leader by far has to be Koga, the poison gym leader. He uses the diabolical combination of the move Smokescreen to obscure your Pokemon's vision, Minimize, so it's harder to hit his Pokemon, and finally, once it's nearly impossible to hit his Pokemon, he will use poisonous attacks on your Pokemon until they slowly lose their health. I also think the ninja theme works perfectly with his Pokemon moves. Smokescreen is like a ninja using a smoke bomb to run from a fight. Beating gym leaders is also a big deal. Not only do they up the obedience level cap, allow you to use new HM moves in the overworld, and even the badges themselves giving you a slight stat boost, they give you TMs. Technical machines. Now that we've been collecting Pokemon, we should be improving their battling capabilities, and one of the ways to do this is through TMs and HMs, technical machines and hidden machines. TMs were single use and sometimes contained near useless moves, but other times contained great moves like Earthquake. Moves like that could help you out a lot, considering the move pools of some of these Pokemon in the games are absolutely dreadful. They were often given as rewards for beating gym leaders, but could also be found all over the map. The biggest setback was they were single use. Once you used them, they were gone. The only way to get another one was to replay the game and grab it again. And of course, the infinite version of TMs were HMs. Hidden machines were necessary moves that you had to put on your Pokemon in order to cut, use strength, or surf. These were moves that were required in the overworld to advance to the next area of the game. Now, you didn't have to use the Pokemon you taught the HM to, but they had to keep the move forever. It could not be deleted. The moves themselves weren't the worst in the game. They often get a bad reputation for that. Cut had 50 base power, Strength had 80, and Surf had 95. There are much worse moves in the game than those. It was just a nuisance sometimes that you needed them. With only 4 available moves per Pokemon, it still felt restrictive. I think the idea here was to have your Pokemon actually help you in the overworld. They weren't just for battling, but they were for practical reasons too, like transportation or moving things. I want to talk about the bag. I know I'll get disagreements on this, but out of all the faults of this game, I think the biggest fault is this damn bag. The bag in Red and Blue only had space for 20 items. That's outrageous. Between HMs, key items, Pokeballs, healing items, stat boosters, rare candies, that space dried up really quick. Now, I'll take the blame here. As a kid, I had no idea that you could deposit all of those set items into the PC. Do you know how insane I was? I somehow held on to all the key items in HMs and managed to use the bag with only like 3 spots. There are some key items that are only ever used in specific sequences that I think could have been just taken out once you're done with them. Like for example, the ticket for the SSN or the key card for the Selfco Tower. When you leave the SSN, the guy standing there could have taken the ticket from you and said something like, I guess you won't be needing this anymore. At Selfco, after you defeat Giovanni and you're leaving, the secretary at the first floor could say, oh, that's for employees only or something. This could have gotten rid of some of the clutter for items that you would only ever use once. Eventually, you get access to the bike. This enables you to travel around Kanto much quicker than before. While that's great, I actually think the design of when this was given to you was brilliant too. You can't be given it too early, because you're supposed to be interacting with the world, talking to NPCs. You need to be paying attention to your surroundings and exploring. If you were given the bike immediately, or within the first couple towns, you'd just be zipping by without a care in the world, then wondering why you didn't know where to go. Around the same time you get access to the bike, you get access to Diglett Cave and HM Cut. Those enable you to make your way back to Pallet Town or Viridian City. At the precise moment the game introduces backtracking to get you through areas you were once blocked from, it gives you the bike. You'll still run into random Pokemon, but you can still get to your destination much quicker than walking. And this is great, because when you go to areas you've already been to before, you don't want to spend a lot of time walking around again. From a design standpoint, this was brilliant. And then once you finally get to Saffron City, the game finally feels massive. You can backtrack in 4 different directions. In neighboring Celadon, you'll get access to HM Fly. Backtracking has been introduced to all areas by this point, and it would have been dreadful even if you had the bike to just go back to every area again. The timing for mobility in this game was perfect. The design of the game map was very well thought out too. Do you remember traveling around the map and seeing places that were blocked off and suddenly remembering that you could go back to that spot now that you had access to Cut or another HM? Or how about the obscure river north of the rock tunnel? It looked innocent enough at the time, but you get a flash of memory, knowing that you could potentially surf on that river now, using the river and finding the power plant. I wonder what could be in there. The game map isn't enormous, but it feels larger than it is when portions of the route are blocked off and not even necessary to return to beat the game. What this does is, if you happen to be retracing your steps and you realize you can go somewhere you couldn't before, it makes you start applying that to the whole map again. You start revisiting areas again to see what else you can discover, and you get a rush when you realize you can now cut that tree or surf to the other side of that river. Team Rocket was always curious to me. They're a gang that dress up almost like a paramilitary group. Their goal is pretty much to steal Pokemon and create havoc across the region. The first time you encounter them, it's in Mount Moon. I wonder where the police or military was from the Kanto region. Aren't they going to come in and stop Team Rocket from doing all this? A detail that I've always noticed is that their hideout is in Celadon, and it seems like they basically spread out their tendrils from that point. You first encounter them in Mount Moon, which is northwest of Celadon, and seemingly as far as they would ever reach. But from there, they're found in Saffron, Lavender Town, and Cerulean. These are all in the same neighborhood of each other. I also like how they always use poison-type Pokemon like Grimer and Zubat. I can't really put my finger on it, but the idea that they'd use poison-type Pokemon just made sense. After you retake Selfco Tower from Team Rocket, you figure the fight is probably over. You've saved Kanto. only for it to be revealed later on that Giovanni, the leader of Team Rocket, is actually the 8th gym leader. Did this reveal shock anybody else? I remember the first time that happened and losing my mind. I also wondered how much of the trainers in the gym knew about this. Had they just been working there never knowing that Pokemon's version of Al Capone was really their gym leader? Or had they known and just been hush-hush about it? Are they Team Rocket members themselves? I guess you can't really have a conversation about these games without talking about the glitches. These games have a bit of a reputation with glitches. Due to a coding error, Focus Energy, which is supposed to double your critical hit chance, actually halves it. For very similar reasons, if you raise your stats too high, they roll over and go back down again. But the greatest glitch of all is Missing No. Missing No stands for missing number. If you watch the old man north of Viridian City catch a Weedle, then immediately fly to Cinnabar Island and surf along its eastern bank, you should encounter Missing No. After the encounter, the 6th item in your bag will have drastically more items. That's rare candies, TMs, anything you could ever want. This glitch somehow spread across the entire country because everybody I knew about this glitch. When I was a kid, I would perform it regularly. Getting infinite rare candies and make your Pokemon go to level 100 to prove how cool you were. Or comedians like me who would make Magikarps level 100. Missing No theories were also abound. It was actually a new Pokemon that you needed to use the Sylph Scope on, just like you would the ghost at the Pokemon Tower. Fossil Pokemon were a bit tricky to obtain, but the fact that they exist added another layer of depth of what could be if you could imagine more Pokemon in the future. The existence of fossil Pokemon was just like real life. There were dinosaurs before us. There was a whole different world of Pokemon that existed long ago, and if they could be revived in this game like Jurassic Park, the possibilities only further expanded when you dreamt up of more Pokemon. I can't tell you why, but I never liked Omanyte or Omastar. I always loved how Kabutops looked, and I mean, he has frickin' scythes for hands. Child me always assumed Kabutops was a very old version of Scyther before it started evolving into what we now see as Scyther. What wasn't so great is that you couldn't really get access to them until you had Surf and could go to Cinnabar Island. But for anybody not in the know, you could actually get to Cinnabar Island by going south of Pallet Town rather than going through Seafoam Islands. So if you wanted to restore one of the 3 fossil Pokemon earlier, you could do that once you got Surf. A special mention for Eevee is necessary. Eevee can evolve into 3 very different Pokemon, and you get it at a great point in the game. Eevee is a gift Pokemon located in Celadon City, and is level 25. If you have 3 or more Pokemon in your party by this time, level 25 is actually a great spot to put this Pokemon into your party. The elemental types of Jolteon, Flareon, and Vaporeon are also great and plug any remaining holes that you may have on your team. In the playthrough for this video, I chose to evolve it into Jolteon. It's super fast and hits decently hard with Thunderbolt. The legendary bird Pokemon of Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres added so much excitement and wonder to these games. They were one of a kind in your game, and they were referred to in the singular, suggesting that there wasn't a population out there supporting them. They were almost godlike. Their design, stats, and levels displayed their legendary status. I usually don't use legendaries anymore because it sometimes makes the games too easy, but I don't fault anyone for using them. Being able to use Articuno in the final stages of the game with its ice attacks can turn around a whole battle. And I always love Zapdos and his Drill Peck for some reason. The culmination of your battling career is upon you when you enter the Elite Four. They're by far the best trainers in the Kanto region, and you'll need to get through them to beat the champion. You must beat them one by one, and you are not allowed to use a Pokemon Center. While this is supposed to be a huge challenge where you can't use a Pokemon Center throughout the whole thing, you can still save before battles and buy and use restore items like Full Restore and Revives. Which for me kind of sours the experience, and I always try to just never use them and see if I can get it all in one go. How about they let you restore after each battle, but they restrict you from using any items during the battle? That would have kept the integrity of the battle itself between you and your opponent and not become a who has more items debate. The Elite Four aren't much different than gym leaders admittedly, but the little touches like their design or floor layouts when you encounter them still make everything feel really intense. The music during the entire Elite Four sequence is great and adds to the seriousness. You've collected all 8 badges. You finally beat the Elite Four. You are now champion. Wait, no way! It's him! The final battle with your rival is the most intense part of the game. He's become champion before you. Despite you having just fought 4 amazing trainers to get here, you still must fight him without access to a Pokemon Center. Just like when he chose a starter that would do well against you, it doesn't feel fair. The music to this fight is so iconic. I hear it in my head randomly to this day. If you're ever in a position to get him to his last Pokemon and it's his starter, I always like throwing in my own starter and seeing if mine could finish the battle. Beating my rival with my type disadvantaged starter, there are few things as satisfying as that. Yes, I'm that petty. Well, the battle's over. After beating the game, you arrive back in Pallet Town, where it all began. The decision to leave these games open-ended and even make post-game content was a brilliant one. Expecting you to have completed your Pokedex before the Elite Four, if you ever wanted to feel like you completed everything, would have just been silly. So the decision may seem obvious, but I also respect that the correct one was made and supported. Being able to keep your beloved team and continue your quests made everything feel continuous, like there was more still out there. And there was. Cerulean Cave had been guarded from your entry until you had become champion of Kanto. The cave is located a little bit north of Cerulean, and don't ask me why, but I always looked at the guy guarding it as if he had like a Kingsguard hat on. I think it's because the cave entrance makes it look like he has a big hat. I don't know, it still looks like that to me. This cave is filled with the strongest Pokemon in the game and even has some evolved form Pokemon. It's a brutal maze not for the faint of heart, but lurking at the end of the cave, it was there. Mewtwo, by far the strongest and hardest to catch Pokemon in the game. Only you, the champion, are strong enough to catch this thing. I think before any other generation of Pokemon came out, this is probably my favorite Pokemon. He looked so unbelievably badass. He was even foreshadowed back in the Pokemon Mansion on Cinnabar Island if you're reading the entries. Once you've caught Mewtwo, you've ascended to the tippy top of the mountain. There isn't anything left to do. Well, there was one thing left to do. Alright, it's time to talk about the 151st Pokemon, Mew. Mew was also very powerful and could learn any move in the game, but it could only be obtained at special in-person events. The only other way to get Mew was by a glitch, and a glitch many of us never knew until well into adulthood. I hope we're still in our time machine, because people not of this era need to realize that Mew was a figment of our imagination. It sounded like yet another schoolyard rumor. And yes, I was a kid that fell for Mew being under the truck. Something as simple as an asset only used once in a hidden way was enough to spurn the imagination of millions. I wasn't the only one. The only way to legitimately obtain Mew was by attending in-person events so that it could be put on your cartridge. These were usually held at convention centers or malls and Toys R Us. But here's the thing, I was born and raised in the Seattle area. Nintendo of America headquarters was right down the street in Redmond. I lived in an area that actually got a lot of attention from Nintendo. I had actually been to a Mew distribution event at my local mall. My mom and I were shopping, and as I rounded the corner to the food court, I saw it. It must have been hundreds of kids, Pokemon signs everywhere, advertisements for Pokemon everywhere. My mother went white. She knew what was about to happen. I clutched her and I said, "What is this? Mom, can I go look?" She was just as astonished as me. Whatever this was, I was in heaven. I saw a kiosk where they said they were putting Mew onto people's cartridges. There was just one problem for me. I didn't have my Game Boy on me. I begged and pleaded with my mom, and she said absolutely no. We lived a little bit too far away from the mall to just drive there and back again. It was over. That was my chance. But even I didn't know about the event, and I lived near one. I'll say that this tactic was actually incredible for Pokemon's marketing. It worked in the United States for sure, but Mew was more of a mystery to the Japanese audience because it truly hadn't been discovered until they got distribution events. In fact, some people at Game Freak actually believe they sold even more copies because of this mystery. People wanted to join the hunt for this secretive Pokemon. It was 2 years later in the United States that we would get Red and Blue, so while it was still rumored, there was actually enough evidence to prove Mew did exist. Now, you technically don't need Mew to complete your Pokedex, but still, this was a really unfair way to distribute such a cool Pokemon. If you never went to these events, you never got one. Unfortunately, Game Freak would continue this method years into the future. Those have always been blemishes on these games' longevity in my opinion. Making you go to these in-person events that would only happen once in a lifetime didn't feel fair at all. Way back at the beginning of my video, I mentioned pushing back on the narrative about these games being nearly unplayable. Admittedly, this is a fringe opinion. I think a more balanced criticism held by many is that they're flawed in many ways but provide a great foundation for improvement. I'll be even more positive than that, and here's why. In regards to moves like Wrap and Focus Energy being either annoying or literally broken, they're not enough to ruin the game. You'll hardly ever see Focus Energy used, and Wrap is usually resigned to a few trainers and Erica's gym. And with glitches, I don't think you'd ever run into these casually. Maybe Missing No, but it seems unlikely that you would do that sequence of events or ever talk to that old man again. I just don't think you'd ever encounter many of these glitches in a casual playthrough, and therefore shouldn't really be considered a hit if we're speaking from a casual standpoint. I still love these games, blemishes and all. I'm sure it's nostalgia. I've admitted to my biases. I'm okay with that. The foundations laid by these games are as solid as can be. Everything that came after these games used its core tenets and structure it laid out. They're still largely used today in modern counterparts. The games have been remade several times if you're looking for all that polish. But in late 2023, my friend even played Gen 1 for his first time, and it was an incredible thing to watch. He loved it. That further proved that the magic is still there. I will always love these games and the joy they continue to bring me. To all the people who made it this far, thank you for watching.